Hello and welcome to episode 36 of the Best Games period. I'm your host, Jack Gardner, and with me this week is the lovely, handsome, and talented Daniel Jones. And this week we have lost our monkey, our mojo monkey, and Jeremy Brown is not here. However, we will carry on, we will persevere, and we will talk about Bastion from Supergiant Games as we can, the best we can.
Yeah, because, even though we lost our mojo, we can still build that wall.
Yeah, and building that wall is a really, seems like a really timely thing to be talking about this year in particular.
Yeah. Bastion is Zolf. Trump is Zolf.
You know, actually, I said that as kind of just like, oh, wall, politics. There's kind of a crossover there. But actually, after I said it, I realized there are a lot of similarities between the current political cycle and Bastion.
It has a deceptively deep story.
That's a good way of putting it. But before we dive into that, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I've been working a bunch this week. We had a big ceiling leak in our building at work, so I had to go back on Monday to hang out with the Serve Pro company that we hired to clean it.
Surf Pro?
Serve.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, Surf Pro sounds like the opposite of what you want when there's a leak.
Hey, dude. Just catching some waves, but I heard you had some water in your hallway. Thought maybe I could catch that too. No. Serve Pro. So it was super annoying because I'm not gonna.
You're not gonna go.
I'm not gonna sully the name of Serve Pro, but needless to say, they ruined my dinner. I had plans to grill steak.
Ooh.
And it wasn't completely their fault. The other problem is that, I had to go back simply because the freaking HVAC system decided to leak a bunch of water. So it sucked. But
Ugh.
I got to leave work early today because I had some extra time. So
Nice.
it was fine. So gave me a little extra time to play No Man's Sky. Because that game's pretty good.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would describe it. It's pretty good.
What have you been up to?
This week I've just kind of been working, persevering, pushing through. Not really up to a whole ton of craziness. I've just there are a few articles I've been pushing through the editing process, like. Right now, I'm working on one for Extra Life called, not going to tell you what it's called, but basically it's by this lady who writes for the Extra Life website every now and then, named Emily Palmieri. I think I pronounced that correctly. And she likes kind of reviewing and critiquing older CGI films.
Oh.
And so she wrote a piece on basically trying to uncover the mystery of this Final Fantasy CGI South Korean knockoff.
Well,
it's a pretty interesting article. I always enjoy seeing what she writes because no one else writes about that stuff.
Yeah.
I love cheesy, terrible movies. So
crazy.
Yeah.
All right.
Check it
Cool.
out. It'll probably be up sometime this week. Maybe next week. So, how about Bastion?
Yeah. That's a great game.
Yeah. So, for if that seemed like a weird transition, it's because we just spent like an hour talking about No Man's Sky, and that's kind of going to be spun off into its own thing. But this is the Bastion episode, so we're going to be talking about Bastion.
Yes.
Came out on originally Xbox 360. A couple months later, came out on PC in 2011. And since then, it's kind of come out on everything, like iOS. It might not be on Android, but I know it's on PlayStation 4 for sure.
Yep, it is.
And I think last year it came out on Vita.
It's on Mac. I'm pretty sure it is on Android.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. But anyway.
It's on everything.
It really is. Designed by Gavin. Gavin's not a name. Why did I say Gavin?
Hey, somebody out there is named Gavin, and he just heard you say that, and now he's crying. Poor Gavin. It's okay, Gavin. We know that your name is real.
Allegedly real. But it's designed by Supergiant Games, which is a very small studio. Only 7 people, really, at the time Bastion was made, anyway. Designed by Amir Rao. I hope I'm saying his name right.
Yep, I think so.
And Greg Kasavin is the writer on that. Did a fantastic job. And we'll go into why later in some more detail. And then composed by Darren Korb, who has kind of risen into prominence as being kind of a go-to fantastic indie game composer. Did phenomenal work on Bastion. I think he one-upped himself for Transistor, but we'll probably talk about that in a dedicated Transistor episode. Basically came out and took the world by storm. It's kind of right at the beginning. I wouldn't say right at the beginning of the indie revolution, but pretty close.
It was close to the start.
Yeah.
Of it. I think it's actually pretty telling when I went back and read some of the reviews, and people were still talking about it as though they were surprised at how good it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
One review, I forget which publication, was basically talking about how weird it was to be walking through the Warner Bros. Booth at PAX and see Arkham City next to
Would
Bastion.
it have been Arkham City?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been Arkham Asylum?
No.
Really?
Arkham Asylum came out in 2009.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Man,
so
that series has been around for a long time.
Yeah, right? So, like, they were just talking... The review was saying that the game is good enough to hold up next to a big AAA game like that. And it was just like... And I saw other ones... I saw some other review where it said it's one of the best stories that you'll see in an indie game. And it was like, well... just an indie game? Not like it was just a different mentality then. It was like indie games were this small little subset that was not the same, and it just wasn't on the same level. People didn't consider them to be on the same level as the big AAA games.
Well, and now it's interesting because now in 2016 it's almost expected to be on an equal playing field. Like, right. Indie developers are expected to be able to turn out something that can compete alongside AAA games, or can be advertised alongside AAA games.
Well, look at No Man's Sky now.
I mean, No Man's Sky is an indie game made by a small studio and was hyped up as if it was a AAA game. And and you know, not to derail back into that game. Abort. But like that kind of that same thing happened with like some of the tentpole games being shown at E3 or at press conferences are these new indie games because studios, platforms can make them, can basically buy them out to be platform exclusive, at least for a time.
Yep.
More so than AAA games, which is one thing we saw with like Ori and the Blind Forest.
Right. Or Abzu that just came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time for indie games. We have to keep that in mind as we kind of go forward in this conversation.
Yeah.
And it is odd that Warner Brothers ended up publishing this game.
It's interesting. I don't presume to know how that agreement came about, but yeah, that's definitely interesting.
I'd assume it's because they needed more money to finish the game, and because
right.
in 2011 you could put out a game, you could publish that yourself online via Steam or something like that, but
right.
I imagine they needed more funding to finish it and then get it onto consoles and stuff like that. Which, incidentally, speaking of buying smaller indie games to be console exclusive for a time, here we go. It was console exclusive to Xbox 360 for several months before it came out on PC.
Quite a while,
and years before it came out on anything else.
Years before PS3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it kind of took the world by storm. And if I had to list like influential indie game releases, it would probably go number 1, Braid, which we've already talked about on the show. Go listen to our Braid episode. Then it would go Castle Crashers, which we haven't talked about on the show, but might be worth an interesting episode at some point. And then third would be probably Bastion, which is interesting because a couple years ago I did kind of what I thought were the best games of the generation, not just of the year, but of the entire console generation, and I put Bastion at number 2.
Yeah, you did.
I think it Braid. Looking back on it, I probably should have switched where Braid and Bastion fell on my list, but because Braid did a whole bunch of things that were just, you can argue that maybe it was right place, right time for some things, but it's a brilliant game. It's brilliant in its own right, and a lot of modern indie game designers point to that, especially if they're making puzzle games, point to that as kind of a must play.
Right.
So it's really important, but Bastion is also, I think, while maybe not as important to indie games as a whole, or as important to, like, say, the puzzle genre, I think it did a really interesting thing in the realm of decisions in games and choice.
Yeah.
That a lot of games really hadn't explored to the depth that I dropped a pen. To the depth that Supergiant Games went.
I think the very next year, The Walking Dead came out, and even before that, like Mass Effect and Heavy Rain were doing those kind of things.
But indie games weren't doing those kinds of things.
But indie games, exactly. Indie games hadn't really started doing that kind of stuff yet. And
that's kind of where I think Telltale Games came out the next year with that. But even that came from Telltale Games drew a lot from stuff like Indigo Prophecy, Heavy Rain.
Right.
So the David Cage, as much as, we probably haven't called him out specifically on this show yet. As much as his later games have not been particularly well received, shall we say, or well regarded, he laid the groundwork for a lot of the Telltale stuff, a lot of those adventure games, decision making, kind of laid that groundwork. But I think where there's a stark difference between that and what Bastion is doing is that the decisions in Bastion are active. They're in game. They're not pausing the game to, you know, make a choice, except maybe the last one, you know.
Right.
It's reactive. It reacts to your play style.
Well, that's totally true, and the way that Bastion lets you choose is so tied in to the gameplay so well that it ties into the gameplay, and then it comes back around and ties into the story at intervals. And I don't think we can downplay the importance of the narration too.
Right. Like, we haven't gotten to that yet.
But... Yeah. But that has to do with it because he reacts to what you do.
Yeah,
you know?
And that plays into the decisions that you make because it's as you go, it's adding context.
Right.
That constant stream of narration is what makes the game. Like, it's you if you took that out, the entire thing is a completely different beast.
Right.
So it's hard to overstate how important that.
Right.
Words are hard. But I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I totally know what you mean. I'm okay, so should we step back and try to give like what is Bastion about?
Do you mean thematically or plot-wise?
Plot-wise.
Okay. Plot-wise, the bare bones is you're in this fictional world, you wake up, and there has been an event called the Calamity. And the Calamity, as far as the player understands it, is some cataclysmic explosion. Or of magic, or some science and magic mix. And it has ripped the land apart into flying islands. And as you progress through the game, you learn that this explosion, the Calamity, is a result of a conflict between these two nations. One is Kelondia. I'm probably not saying that right. And the other is
Caelandia.
Caelandia?
Yep.
Okay. Caelandia and the Ura. And the Ura lived underground, and they infiltrated Caelandia and kind of hijacked some top-level scientists to make this bomb. And at the last minute, one of the Ura scientists switched it so that it affected Caelandia. And so this giant explosion basically killed everyone except for a select few people in the zone, in the explosion zone, of which the main character is one. And then there's Rux, who is the narrator. Then there's Zulf, who is an Ura ambassador. And then there's Zia, who is an Ura girl who was raised in Caelandia. And all these people eventually make their way to the Bastion, which is kind of this safe hub, I guess, in the middle of all that destruction. And then the protagonist, the kid, begins kind of stitching the world back together as he can. And then that's complicated later on by some Ura survivors coming to attack the Bastion, and then there's some revelations about the bomb, and that, Zulf wasn't aware that the Ura had made this calamity happen. And it all kind of culminates in this moment where you're trying to get this last shard to activate the Bastion and maybe have a shot at reversing the calamity.
Yeah.
And there are kind of two important decisions you make at the end. And one is you can choose... you can basically choose to leave Zulf to the mercy of the Ura, who are basically in the process of killing him when you come across them, because he led the kid to them, and the kid is, killed. He's kicking butt and taking names. He's killing a lot of people.
Yeah.
You can choose to save him, in which case you have to slowly, pick him up and carry him out while all these archers are trying to kill you, or you can choose to leave him there. And then the final decision is when you finally get back to the Bastion, have it fully powered up, you can choose between either going off and starting a new world or reversing time and attempting to stop the calamity from happening in the first place. If you choose to go off and start the new world, the game ends. If you choose to reverse time, it starts you off in New Game Plus.
Right.
And that's basic as far as I understand it. Maybe I'm missing a few things, but
no, you pretty much hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Can I just... A criticism that I have of this game is that I don't like tying New Game Plus into the ending of a game.
Why don't you like it here?
Because I remember thinking it was neat at the time, but I love this game. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it reminds me that I'm playing a game. So, it was basically like such a binary choice, and it was just, hey, at the end it was basically the game came up and said, hey, do you want to keep playing? Because you can, or you can just stop playing, which that was my choice. Not, for me, it was not the actual choice that the kid was trying to make.
Right.
So it took away from the story. Like, it just made it not matter as much.
Well, I think that's a valid criticism, and I think that's more... I think that's a more modern way of looking at it, because I feel like when it first came out, people were kind of taken aback by having that choice,
Right.
Because that's not something a lot of games did, and it also wasn't the kind of choice where there's a clear good and bad.
Right.
And up until that point, you had Mass Effect, maybe. You had some hardcore RPG role playing where you could make those kind of morally gray choices. So probably Mass Effect, KOTOR 2, Baldur's Gate, going back, those kinds of decision-based RPGs.
Yeah.
And then you also had that in more mainstream games like Fable. Except in those mainstream games, oftentimes those choices were black and white. You were either the goodest saint ever, or you were the evilest villain in the world. It was... Your choice was help the old lady across the street or electrocute her to death for her money. Like there was very few graying of the situations.
Right.
And I feel like Bastion did a good job presenting these situations where both decisions were okay. Like you could feel both ways about this. And even that decision where do you save Zulf or not?
Oh yeah.
He over the course of the game, he wrongs you. He's a big reason why things go really terribly at the end.
Yeah.
And you can save him, but there are definite downsides to attempting to save him, and there is definitely a lot of motivation to not save him too.
But the moment when you do save him, if you save him, I don't think I ever chose not to save him.
Right.
And I played this game, New Game Plus, probably close to 10 times.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It was just my go-to for a while, where I would just pop it in and not even think. And I had the most baller fucking repeater pistol that it shot these bullets that honed in on enemies, and just I didn't even have to aim by the end. It was just so powerful. It was fantastic. So yeah, I don't think I ever chose not to save him, because the moment when you do save him is so powerful.
Yeah, it's I would say that out of the entire game, to me, if I had to pick a specific moment, because if you're picking specific elements of the game, I think 90% of people would say the narration is like the selling point of the game.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about specific moments, that the entire sequence where you're walking out of the Ura base with Zulf in your arms, unable to attack or anything like that, is really powerful, because when you initially pick him up, all of the remaining Ura are firing their weapons at you, and you can't attack them back. You just have to leave, and you're very slow because you're carrying a guy. And as you progress, they kind of slowly stop shooting, and they just stop. They just stand there and stare at you as you leave.
Yeah.
And that is a cool bit of storytelling without words.
Yep.
I thought that was, to this day, it still kind of gives me chills.
And there's the one soldier that shoots the last arrow at you, and like his friend like whacks him over the head when he does. It's great.
Yeah, it's really it's a very touching moment of humanity in a time when games weren't really expected to have that much,
Yeah.
So that was a really powerful moment for me. I think you touched a little bit though on the gameplay, having played it 10 times, and the ballinist repeater. But it's so fun to play. It's fun and easy to play.
It is. We're not going to get too much into Transistor, but I never could really get into Transistor, and a big reason for that was that it wasn't as accessible for me.
Interesting.
And I like to bring this up, but I interviewed Greg Kasavin a couple months before this came out on Xbox, and one of the things that we talked about was they wanted it to be a game that kids could enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the team members had kids recently while they were making the game and before they were making the game, and they wanted it to be a game that their kids could play. And at the time there weren't a ton of games that kids could really play that would necessarily be games that kids would want to go back and revisit down the line.
Right.
Like, and he brought up, where's Mario and Zelda for this generation? And I think that ended up being more along the lines of something like Terraria and Minecraft.
Yeah.
And stuff that my nephew does play. But it's an admirable goal for Bastion to be that kind of a game.
That's really interesting, because when I think about it, this is a very accessible. It's very accessible gameplay wise.
Yeah.
But I think maybe part of what holds it back from becoming, the Mario or Zelda of the last gen was, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Not that it was too beautiful, but the visually there's a lot going on.
There is, yeah.
It's not necessarily as clear cut as Mario. Mario side scrollers have relatively simple and easily identified graphics.
Yep. I think the Rayman games suffer from the same.
Okay, yeah, that
kind of thing.
That makes sense. Yeah. And for a kid, I don't think the political storyline is going to be a big hook.
Right.
And it's not necessarily as... I feel weird saying this because I think it's an absolutely gorgeous game. I'm trying to put it into the context of kids.
It's
and not that kids can't enjoy sophisticated things, but it's almost too adult in its approach towards what it does that make sense?
Yeah, because there's so many fine details in there that kids just wouldn't necessarily care about or appreciate.
And that doesn't mean I'm conflicted because my approach towards kid-friendly media has always been you don't dumb it down for kids.
Right. I'm with you on that too.
But at the same time, you have there are certain things that draw kids in more so than others, and I think that's a large reason why Terraria and Minecraft are huge.
Yeah.
And
despite it being a very colorful game, it's also very muted and drab at times, and it's dark in both its themes and visuals sometimes.
Yeah, I think this is a good game for teenagers.
Young adults.
Yep. There we go.
Yep.
That's
definitely.
This is the Prydain Chronicles of video games.
There you go.
Black Cauldron fans out there, what's up?
I adore the art style though. I don't want to bash the visuals because
you don't want to Bastion
Jen Zee,
the visuals.
Bastion the visuals.
Sorry.
Because Jen Zee did a fantastic job. The art director did a great job with the visuals. And I have a Bastion shirt and what? Yeah.
Side note: Jen Zee, look up her work as just an artist outside of video games. She is phenomenal. She's one of my favorite illustrators, artists working. Like everything she makes is gorgeous.
Yeah, she's very talented. The whole team is just full of talent. They're just bursting with talent out the yin yang.
Yeah, I'm not to go off on too much of a tangent. I'm curious how Pyre is going to be. That's their game coming out next year.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm super interested in it, which is strange.
No, me neither.
Because I love their first two games, but nothing I've seen of Pyre is super intriguing to me yet, even though I guess we don't know that much about it.
Right.
But it's just a weird thing of note.
And I was thinking about that with Bastion. When you look at it on the surface, it looks like just a cute little adventure game with a novel narration shtick. And then you actually play it, and it just unveils so many layers of depth. And Transistor's definitely the same way, even though Transistor's not as deceptively simple on the surface. So you never know what Pyre's gonna be like when you actually play it.
Right.
Which is something I really appreciate about their games and their game design. This game is just so well designed. We were talking about the gameplay. I mean, you have all these different options. You have so many different weapons that you can choose from. and you have different ways that you can upgrade the weapons. You have different like tonics and stuff that you can use to increase your abilities. And then you have like these idols that you can put on the shrine that make the game more difficult if you want to, which was fun in New Game Plus when I was on my 9th and 10th runs.
Well, and I mean, part of it, I read a review, right? And in this review, I can't remember where it was from. This was back when it first came out. But there were some people who were legitimately upset that it didn't have like in-depth brawler combos and things like that.
What? Why would it? Okay.
Because they felt the controls were too simple.
See that?
Yeah.
That's
like that's part of what makes it brilliant, though.
Right.
Is that each of the things you have a limited amount of weapons you can bring with you into, each level, and each of those weapons can be upgraded in different ways. You can bring different upgrades into each of those levels, and then each weapon is given its own button, and the gameplay is just so smooth that you can transition between different gameplay styles whenever you want. It's great.
Yeah.
I never had a thought once when I was playing that game that this needs combos.
No, not once.
It's not Devil May Cry. Not every game has to have combos.
Although, I will say, the only other game that I've played New Game Plus in, like, more times than Bastion, the original Devil May Cry.
How many times have you played that?
Probably like 14.
Jeez. That is a lot.
Yep. It kept me company when I lived in Boston.
All right.
Yep. Yeah, the depth doesn't come from the controls.
No.
The depth in this game comes from the systems, the RPG systems, and again, they're pretty light RPG systems, but
they have very definite rewards and payoffs.
Yeah, and branching, like tons of branching combinations, ways that you can combine different weapons together, and you can just different ways that you can play that game, all through those systems that they developed, and that's where the depth really comes in. It's not in the controls, which benefited the game because then they were able to put it on everything.
That's true.
Like, they put it on phones, and it's fun on phones. I have it on my phone, and I enjoy playing it. And that's because the controls themselves are really simple. I don't know. That's all I got for that.
Well, yeah, it's one of those games that... So we've touched on the controls, the art design, and we've also talked about the story a little bit. Yep. We haven't really touched on the music.
Oh my gosh.
Darren Korb and Logan Cunningham. Logan Cunningham makes this game. He's the voice of Rux, and he's the constant narrator throughout the game. And he nails it. Absolutely nails it. He has the kind of voice you could just listen to all day.
Well, it's like this Sam Worthington kind of, like, thing he's got going on. And
I don't know what you mean by
that. Sam Worthington, isn't that the dude with the mustache? Wait, who's the...
You are not helping.
Have you seen Golden Compass?
The movie?
Yeah.
No, I read the books.
Um.
I prefer to fill things in with my imagination, Daniel.
Oh, the audience doesn't get that joke. You'll get it. You'll get it when you listen to the No Man's Sky episode, everybody. No, it's wait. Now I have to look him up. Jack, way to go. Sam Worthington. I think he died a few years ago. No, oh no, Sam Worthington. Never mind. That's the freaking. No, who's the? God damn it! Sam Worthington is from Avatar.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was like, isn't that white guy from Avatar, and who looks like every other white guy from a monster movie?
Hold on, I'm looking up Golden Compass on IMDb so I can get this guy's name. Oh man, he's like a cowboy dude.
Okay, yeah. The guy from Ghost Rider.
Sure.
He's also in Parks and Rec sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he was the other Ron in Parks and Rec.
Okay, yeah.
What's his name? God damn it, what's his name?
Elliot something?
Why did I get Sam Worthington?
I don't know.
Sam Elliott. That's it. Sam Elliott.
Two Sams.
Wow. So that was woof. That was bad. All right, so anyway, so he has this Sam Elliott voice thing going on, and it's just sexy as all get out.
Yeah. Logan Cunningham. 2 thumbs up for your voice, man.
Yep. I don't even think that's the way he actually talks normally. That's just...
I would hope not. No one would ever be able to get anything done around him. They'd just sit there looking at him.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've not talked to him, but been... Like, at PAX, I interviewed Greg again at PAX, and then I interviewed Amir Rao at another PAX.
Oh, really?
And, yeah.
What was he like?
He was very nice.
I've met Greg before.
Very nice guy.
Yeah.
They're all nice.
Okay.
And so I was right near Logan, and he was talking to some other people, and he just talks like a regular dude. Pretty sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
He has a gift.
Yeah.
But he did a phenomenal job. Cannot stress that enough. And not only that, but Darren Korb with the music to this game. I think this has... I might totally be off on this, but I think Bastion has one of the best-selling video game soundtracks.
I think so.
Of all time.
It came at a time where selling video game soundtracks had started to become a thing.
Yeah, it was not common at all before this. It's good stuff. Like,
it's so good.
I wish I had more. I wish we had Emily from Level with Emily on the show, because she can talk about music and sound smart.
Well, the way that most of the music was made with computers.
Yep.
But he took samples and used a lot of real instruments and looped them in the music, and it's this crazy mix of like electronica and organic music that you just don't hear anywhere.
Yeah, it is that strange mix of like electronic and kind of almost bluegrassy sounds. And you know, we joked when we opened up this episode about building a wall, but there's literally a song called Build That Wall. And there are several songs that have lyrics and such to them. And those have voice work from Logan Cunningham, and also a lady by the name of Ashley Lynn Barrett, who would go on to work on Transistor as well.
And Darren Korb himself sang on another song with Ashley Barrett on the soundtrack. What is that song called? I can't remember.
Setting Sail, Coming Home.
Yeah, Setting Sail. It's a kind of a variation on the Build That Wall melody, and it's just so good. I love that song. I still listen to that song just regularly.
Well, and like, I think we're actually underselling how popular the soundtrack to this game was, because when it released, Supergiant Games did not plan on releasing a soundtrack. It was the community of people who loved the music in this game so much raised such a racket that they put together a digital release for the soundtrack.
Yeah. Well, they released it on vinyl and CD too. I have a signed CD.
Oh, really?
Signed.
That's a collector's item, sir.
Oh, you betcha.
That was a limited run.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. It's one of the video game soundtracks that I'm like, why, like, I listen to the NPR All Songs Considered podcast, and I'm like, God, they need to hear this. Like, they need to listen to this music.
It is weird that video game music has never received the same amount of respect in wider music circles than, say, movie soundtracks.
Yep.
There's just as much work. Sometimes more so in video game soundtracks.
A lot of times more. I mean, look at what 65 Days of Static just did with No Man's Sky, and how it's like, it was a very collaborative effort because they had to make it procedural.
Yeah.
Like, I was doing something the other day in that game, just an aside. I was doing something the other day in that game, and it was a perfect moment. I forget what it was, but I was making a long trek back to my ship, I think, and it was just quiet. And all of a sudden, like, this quiet little piano melody came on as I was walking back to my ship. I was like, that's great. How does it know to do that? But, I mean, that's the kind of work that game composers put in. And not many games have a more essential soundtrack than Bastion does. Like, the soundtrack ties into that game in very important ways.
Yeah. Especially because the songs that are sung in particular are in the context of the game world sung by the characters.
Exactly.
So they have a story importance as well as just sounding beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I've used that term so many times, but I want to talk about, like, my personal experience with this game. I was super excited about it because I just thought it looked like a throwback to simpler 2D games, and it looked really cool.
Well, yeah, for those of you who haven't played it basically looks like kind of a isometric, more accessible version of Diablo.
Right. And I was equating it more with, like, Zelda, because that's what I'm experienced with. But then I played it and realized that actually is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's Diablo. And it's the first of those kind of games that I ever really played, and it got me into that. And it's the first, I mean, it was one of the first games that I really played that had RPG elements. And
really?
I still find that,
Interesting.
Yeah, I still find that I prefer games with light RPG elements. That I had played RPGs prior, and I had played Zeldas and stuff,
but I don't consider the Zelda games to be
No.
RPGs. No. So I didn't know what to expect. I was excited about it, and I had interviewed Greg, and you know, I thought I was going to like this game, but I really didn't know for sure. And then I played it, and the way it communicates its systems to you, and that the narrator really helps with that as well. Mm-hmm. But just the way that it introduces elements to you as you go along, and it never really slows down.
No,
like,
it is
even
paced
towards
perfectly.
The end, you're still getting interesting new weapons that you can use, and
well, it really encourages that second playthrough.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I never hesitated at the end to do the New Game Plus. So it's a really smartly designed game, and it's the kind of game that I wish more kids would play, because it can really demonstrate what good game design is to a generation.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're looking for near perfect game design, like level design, pacing, how to keep your gameplay fresh, this is it. You know, like this is mandatory if you want to understand those things better. What? Just turning this around a little bit.
Yeah.
What could Bastion do better? Because we've praised it a lot.
It's a good question. Yeah.
And I think I I just think it's really hard to find flaws in Bastion, because they nailed what they were going for. It's just where I mean, what could they have done better?
I've tried to think of things that they could do better. I don't find many flaws with that game. I think part of it is that overall the world is interesting, but it's more interesting for the writing and the little things that you find that tell the story, and also what Logan says, what the narrator says. Rooks. More for that than for the visual design of the world. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times the world just looks like it's there for you, like it's designed around the kid and around the game, and not so much that it's just there and you're exploring it and discovering it, and it doesn't, because of the art style. I often didn't really get a great sense that there was much to really miss from this civilization anyway.
Well, yeah, it does feel like, it's always been floating, because we never see it whole, really.
Yeah.
So that sense of destruction and loss isn't necessarily 100% there.
It's told to us rather than shown.
Well, I mean, it is shown to us because everything's broken apart and floating, but that just gives the world a surreal feel, like it was always that way.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying.
I mean, and that's just a consequence of the in media res opening.
Yeah.
But I don't know, fleshing out the history of the world, in the visuals is always something that I wish it did a little bit better. But I don't know.
For me, I think the one complaint I have, because I think they did fine in what you bring up, but I can see where you're coming from. At the same time, I think that they could have done better with a larger narrative coherence. because I feel like there are a lot of like the gameplay, the design decisions in this game are pretty much flawless when it comes to gameplay, visuals, music, all of that stuff. The lines of dialogue are interesting and compelling and make you want to finish it. I just don't necessarily know that all the themes of like loss and war and kind of rebirth and all that stuff. I don't know that they necessarily come together or come through perfectly.
Yeah. I agree. All of the politics in the plot are hard to understand.
Yes.
That's, I don't know, that's not necessarily what to your point, but that's just another thing that
well, and I think a lot of that difficulty stems from the decision to have that narration and having that roundabout way of storytelling, I suppose you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, we're not going to go into Transistor. We've said that multiple times, but I find Transistor to have remedied that problem. And when I compare the two, I find Transistor to be much more thematically cohesive and stronger as a result of that.
I can
Bastion.
Definitely see that. Yeah.
And while I think that there are probably, when we do our Transistor episode, there are definitely other things to call out for Transistor. I think that in terms of theme and narrative, I think it trumps Bastion. I know Daniel has some problems with the gameplay, but
I have problems with the way they told the story in Transistor.
Well,
too,
shut up.
But that's beyond the point.
You're wrong, but that's okay.
I think overall, I think you're right about the cohesion of it. And yeah, I feel like there was a lot in Bastion that you had to dig up. And if you were just paying attention to the narration and just getting all of your story from that, you'd have some trouble understanding everybody's motivations.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. But I think in the grand scheme of things, those are really, really small nitpicks.
Oh yeah, totally.
On a game that is otherwise flawlessly pulling off what it's setting out to do. Do you think this is one of the best games, period? Do you have anything else you need to add?
Come on, Jack, really?
I have to ask.
Of course it's not. I mean, yes, of course it is. Yes, it is. And Jeremy's not on this episode. We're not really completely sure if he's played Bastion. I'm pretty sure that Dylan played Bastion and Jeremy watched a little bit, and that's it. And we should all really, I mean, listeners out there, at Mojo Monkey 12, you need to just harass him.
No, don't harass him
endlessly until
don't
he plays
harass
Bastion.
Him. No.
He can get it on PS4, Xbox One. He can get it on his phone. Just get on that, Jeremy.
Yeah. Don't harass him, but if you want to tell him, just play Bastion.
You can harass him.
No, don't. No. No encouraging harassment, Daniel.
Sorry. What do you think, Jack? What do you say?
I think it is. I mean, I said earlier in the episode, I think this is mandatory playing for anyone who is setting out to make games. Study Bastion. Maybe you're not going for the same narrative thing. Maybe you're not even going for the same gameplay. But study its pacing and the way it's designed, because it is dang near perfect.
Yep.
So, Yeah, it's one of the best games, period.
It certainly is. Mark that one for the books.
Check. Off the list.
Jack.
Daniel.
Thank you for joining me tonight.
It was my pleasure.
It was a pleasure. It was a fun couple of chats that we had.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're curious, we did have about an hour-long discussion about No Man's Sky. Both of us are playing that game, and we're both enjoying it to a point. Me maybe more than Jack. But that episode will be going up sometime. And wait, Jack, tell everybody about Extra Life.
Yeah, Extra Life, what is it?
What is it?
Well, it's basically like a charity walkathon, or, one of those marathons people run for charity, except instead of actually running or walking, not everyone can do that, and not everyone wants to do that.
Nobody wants to do that.
But everyone loves playing games. So everyone who participates in Extra Life can sign up, choose a local Children's Miracle Network hospital to support. 100% of everything they raise from friends, family, or strangers goes directly to support that hospital. And then on November 5th this year, you get to sit down and play games for 24 hours straight. Or, if that doesn't fit into your schedule, you can do it. You can space it out a little bit, or you can do it a different day, however you want to do it. We had one dedicated group of people last year, do it relaying. Like, people they were live streaming, and they would hand off every few hours to someone else. And they did that for a week straight.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was really impressive. But it all goes to help kids. All of it. So you get to play games, you get an excuse to play games, and you get to raise money for kids. And 100% of that money goes to treat sick and injured kids in hospitals. And you know which hospital it's going to. Like, normally, at the end of one of these segments, I'm like, that's a win, that's a win, that's a win. And you know what? I've now lost track of how many wins that is.
There are too many wins.
Too many wins.
You can never have too many wins, actually.
But, I mean, there are too many wins to count. Too many.
True.
So, there's just no downside. So you can find out more and sign up over on extra-life.org. And you can also find this podcast posted every Monday over on community.extra-life.org, where kind of our entire online community gets together and chats about stuff. So head over there and say hi, too.
Cool dizzle. And if you like the best games period, we would love to hear it. We would appreciate reviews on iTunes, and you could just comment on the Extra Life posts, the Game Informer posts, where you can also find the show every Monday. We usually post it in Facebook, and you can find it there. Just comment. Tell us what you think about Bastion, because one of the reasons we do this show is to have a conversation, and the conversation does not need to end at the end of this show. It can continue, and that's part of what we love about doing the show. So tweet us as well at Best Games Period. Like I said, Jeremy is at MojoMonkey12. Jack is at Riverboat Jack. And I am at IndieJones84. And that was episode 36 of the Best Games Period. Hopefully you enjoyed the show, and stay tuned for that No Man's Sky episode at some point, and another one as well on an undisclosed game that we will not tell you because it is subject to change.
But it's
weekly.
But it's probably going to be Mark of the Ninja.
It will probably be Mark of the Ninja, but these things are in flux constantly. So, Mark of the Ninja is a great game, though. Y'all should go play it. I don't know if it's the best game, period. You're going to have to listen to episode 37 for that. So, till then, we'll see you on the Flippity Dippity.
You dork.
I set my sail, fly the wind, it will take me back to my home, sweet home. Lie on my back, clouds are making way for me. I'm coming home, sweet home. I see your star, you left it burning for me. Mother, I'm here. Your star, you left it burning.